Hi, guys. Hey, thanks again for joining me this week for Holy Week. And we're just looking into the scriptures and just spending some time looking at Jesus Christ's last earthly week of ministry. We remember Holy Week starts on Sunday and with the triumphal entry and Jesus Christ marching into Jerusalem, fulfilling Zechariah 9 and showing everyone that the king has come and that the king has come to bring peace to people. We saw yesterday that Jesus Christ not only just marches into Jerusalem, but he goes into the most sacred and most important spot in all of the Jewish community, the temple, and he essentially cleans house. He goes in there, and remember, he kicks over tables and he chases out the money changers, and in his righteous indignation, he calls them out. He says, "This house, my Father's house, will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." And we see that, the temple cleansing unsettles the reality that we think, Jesus is kind of gentle and meek and mild and nice. No. Jesus was angry in that moment. He was good in that moment. And we see that Jesus is zealous for prayer. We see that Jesus is zealous for people to come to him and to God in prayer. And he stands opposed to anyone who would dare obstruct individuals from coming to God in faith. But Tuesday, today, marks a very significant point in Jesus Christ's teaching ministry. Within this, today, there are a number of teachings that Jesus has that are very, very, very significant. Of course, all teaching of Jesus is significant. But Matthew devotes chapters, a significant amount of time within his gospel, talking about today, talking about what Jesus taught on. Chapters 21 through 25, which we don't have enough time, especially in this type of format, to go through every single teaching. But within chapters 21 through 25, Jesus talks in parables. He talks about the parable of the tenants and the parable of the wedding feast. He starts and he remember yesterday he curses the fig tree. The fig tree looked alive. The fig tree looked vibrant. And the fig tree represents national Israel. They looked alive. They looked like things were going well. But when the king came and was expecting fruit or wanting to say, "Hey, where's your fruit?" they didn't have any. In the same way with national Israel, they did not have any fruit, and so Jesus curses them. But Jesus uses that as a segue to talk about faith and how we need to have faith. And if we have faith, we can tell a mountain to be moved, to be cast into the ocean. And how often we need to hear that exhortation, especially today when things are going so crazy. And there's so much faithlessness or unbelief in our society today. We need to have faith. But also Jesus Christ within Tuesday today, he also spends a significant amount of time talking about the Olivet Discourse, or what we call the Olivet Discourse in Matthew chapter 24 and 25, where Jesus essentially lays out what the end times is going to look like. What is the eschaton going to look like? And we see there are markers of what the end times are going to be looking like, wars and rumors of wars, and persecution, and us being delivered into the hands of our trial, and don't be afraid, because the Holy Spirit is going to tell you, and we need to suffer for the sake of the gospel, and the Olivet Discourse is often one of the most discussed and most debated passages in all of the Gospels, if not all of Scripture. And I just want to very briefly say, regardless of where your eschatological position is, we need to understand that we are living in the last days. Now, people have been saying that for 2,000 years. We're in the latter days. Well, of course we are. Jesus Christ, when he came, he inaugurated the close of the age. And so we have to agree that, yes, we're in the last days, but also, too, we need to agree that we need to live like we're in the last days. In fact, that's the exhortation within the Olivet Discourse is, hey, be prepared, get ready. Things are going to end, and to those who endure to the end will be saved. But I want to spend some time within this video, very briefly, going through one chapter, and that's chapter 23. That is the chapter where Jesus Christ pronounces the 7 woes on the Pharisees. It comes after chapter 22, where Jesus Christ, addresses the Pharisees, and he says, what do you think of the Christ? Whose son is he? And of course they answer, he's the son of David. And then Jesus Christ essentially schools them on Psalm 110. He basically says, well, what do you do with Psalm 110? Where David says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand. And they can't argue with him. He basically shuts them up. He is saying that he is the Christ. He is the one that David is speaking of. And it says that they dare not ask him any more questions. They say, we can't argue with him. But we see in Matthew chapter 23, we see that Jesus, again, is addressing. He ups the confrontation. He says, then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do. For they preach, but do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders. But they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. They do all their deeds and are seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. They love the place of honor at feast, and both in the best seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the marketplace, and being called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And call no man your father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Christ. The greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. For you neither enter yourselves nor allow those who would enter to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel across sea and land and make a single proselyte. And when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by the temple, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools! For which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made it the gold sacred? And you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound by oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you have ought to have done, without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup of the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, and the outside also may be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which are outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and uncleanliness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous, saying, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would have not taken part with them in the shedding of the blood of the prophets. Thus you witness against yourselves that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your fathers, you serpents, you brood of vipers. How are you to escape being sentenced to hell? Therefore I send you the prophets and the wise men and scribes, some of whom you kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogue and persecute from town to town, so that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, the blood of the righteous, Abel, to the blood of Zechariah the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I would have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. 7 woes to the Pharisees. Essentially what Jesus is doing is this is the final word. There is no argument to this king. There is no argument to this judge. He has sealed their condemnation. But we see at the very end, it's this blasting, 7 woes. Woe to you, woe to you, woe to you, woe to you, woe to you. But we see at the very end, we see a lament. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I would have gathered you. How often I would have gathered you, your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. But you would not. You see, Matthew chapter 23 does not just present Jesus as a big meanie who's just saying these hard things just to shake people up. No, what we see in Matthew chapter 23 is that these woes, yes, they're coming from a righteous indignation. And yes, there is the condemnation of the judge, but you also see the heart of the Lord. The lament is a real lament. He is hurting, or his heart is breaking, I should say, that he has called these people, and yet they would not come today. God does not take pleasure in the death of the wicked. We see that in Ezekiel 18 and 33. And so what do we learn from this? That yes, Jesus Christ calls out hypocrisy. You cannot fool Christ. You cannot fool Christ with a religious facade. But also, too, we need to understand that the King has come. The Lord has come. And that he calls you to come to him today. Again, please understand, religious facades don't impress Jesus. They don't. Jesus sees right through it. And the Lord beckons you, calls you, commands you to come. And all those who come to him, as we see, he quotes again Psalm 118, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. That there will come a day where everybody will recognize that he is king. And so recognize that he is king, acknowledge him as Lord today in faith. Because at that point that Jesus Christ talks about, it's too late. The king has come. Honor him. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. Love you guys. And spend some time in the Word today. All right.